All right, so let's talk about Deontay Johnson. Nobody wants to talk about Deontay Johnson anymore, but it is the hottest topic of Steelers Nation and one that I'm starting to feel rather strongly about. Deontay Johnson is reportedly now, I think the number is 22 million. I couldn't even tell you where that came from, but that's all everybody's talking about. At the same time, he didn't show up for day one of voluntary workouts. No big deal whatsoever. And people are starting to really dive into his tweets here about like,
Yep.
if they don't have the story, they gonna make one. Don't believe everything you see. Your own fans, my favorite one is chin up gangsta. You been knew the love was fake. That is like such a classic wide receiver tweet. Like just like, yo, the devil moves silently with your friends type tweet. And it doesn't get any better than that. He's just the definition of a wide receiver times a million. Let me ask this. Unless you have thoughts. Do you have thoughts?
No, good.
Okay, let me ask this. Is the drama overblown, or are people rational about Diontae Johnson tweeting some things out, not showing up to day one of voluntary workouts, the whole nine?
I'll say this. I think that Deontay is looking for an extension, and I think he feels like he deserves that extension. And I think that a lot of people who have watched Deontay Johnson over the last couple of years also believe he deserves an extension. Now, when you're an NFL player, obviously you want X dollar amount, you want that contract to be a certain length of time, and you want it sooner rather than later, because God forbid something happened to you and you don't have that financial security for whatever future.
Mm-hmm.
But you also got to understand that these things take time. I have the people that think the Steelers just sit there and don't entertain the thought of extending Deontay Johnson until a bright summer day in July, and you're like, oh, hey, we should probably get this guy locked up since he's heading into the final year of his contract. It's like, no, like these are conversations that are held beginning like last season, and they kind of carry over into the situation we're at now. Guys like Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, those are all guys that are also not planning on showing up to voluntary workouts, may I add. Voluntary. This isn't training camp. This isn't preseason. This is voluntary. Hey, bro, how many reps of 225 can you do workouts? I think Deontay is having a little bit of fun with people with the tweets, but you also got to understand, you don't need to take these tweets at face value. But on the other side of the coin, these guys know what they're doing. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Deontay is not tweeting this stuff for fun,
No. Diontae is, he's a wide receiver, so he's like the smartest social media man on the team, probably. That's just how they move and operate. I think that it's overblown in the sense of it's not directed towards the team. I don't think the Steelers and Diontae have even sat down and had one conversation about whether or not he's going to get extended. That's not going to happen until Minkah gets a deal done, because that's how they operate. And he's seeing all the hate. And I think that's the big thing, is like, I'm starting to see, and this has been going on forever, but like it's hit a point where I start to question like extreme things. Like, was Terrell Owens really like that crazy of a person? Or like, did people just kind of overblow that? A lot of things. Antonio Brown's the exception, but you see these things. Deebo Samuel's getting death threats. AJ Brown, Tennessee Titans fans destroying AJ Brown. Like Diontae Johnson feeling completely abandoned by Steelers Nation because of this, because people don't want to sign him for $20 million a year, which is not a lot of money for a wide receiver next year or the year after. And we'll see that. I am starting to think that we make wide receivers divas. Our wide receivers don't become divas, if that makes sense.
So I agree, but I also think that wide receivers, and I think you almost need to be a little bit of a diva to kind of carry yourself as a top 5 receiver, if you believe so, that whenever you're playing in the league, you kind of need that chip on your shoulder, don't you? You kind of need to walk around the facility like, hey, like, I'm the best here. Like, I am the best pass catcher here. I'm like top 5 in the league. And so like certainly that adds up over time, you know, and especially in like a league and just like a football world where like 7-on-7s are like very like dominant now. Like there's like so many like viral social media clips of like receivers just like winning like one-on-one matchups and like all these like recruiting battles heading from high school to college and, you know, college to the pros. And like everything's kind of like a look at me, look at what I'm doing, social media aspect where, you know, everything's kind of laid on the ground. I don't know. I would not call Deontay Johnson a diva because we
No.
saw divas in Pittsburgh. We saw divas in Pittsburgh. Like textbook dictionary, look it up. Here's what it is: divas and Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. I don't think we're quite there yet with Diontae. I'm not sure if we ever get there with Diontae. But to kind of go back to my point earlier, Homeboy knows exactly what he's doing with those tweets. And yeah, I do think a lot of people do wish that Deontay would shut up and just go out and play football.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, okay, so I know, and that's the perfect. Thank you so much for saying those words. Deontay Johnson, until like right now, has been that guy. And like I've had conversations with Deontay just asking him like, hey dude, have you always been the dude that's just real quiet and it's just like, I'm just going to let my actions speak for itself? And he's like, yeah, man, all throughout high school. And Red McLeod said the same thing. Like, yo, Deontay has always just been this dude that's just real chill. He's not going to say a lot. Now everybody's hating on Deontay, saying Deontay isn't worth this, Deontay isn't worth that. Get rid of Deontay. And now Deontay is like, well, you know, maybe I got something to say because I'm taking this a little bit as disrespect. And he should be taking it as disrespect because that's what it is. Good.
No, continue your rant because I want to ask you a question whenever you're done.
And I don't really have much more. I think that it's hit a point now where the fans, and like that sucks because I don't want to call the fans out because the fans are allowed to have their opinions just like we're allowed to have our opinions, and Deontay is allowed to have his opinion. Like I get it. Like, and I get the argument. Like I get that side of it is this Pittsburgh Steelers don't pay wide receivers this kind of money. Diontae Johnson isn't a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, so he shouldn't be paid like a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. But I also get the other side of it that says Diontae Johnson is worth $20 million right now because next year he's going to be worth $25 million. And when, you know, somebody surpasses Tyreek Hill, you know, it's just going to keep going up and up. My other thing is Deebo Samuels, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. Those are the guys that everybody keeps bringing up in this argument. The whole, well, he's not these guys. Well, he's not going to get paid like these guys. Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, and Deebo Samuels will be in their tax bracket. Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill are in the pretty much 30-ish tax bracket. Yeah, Neverland of wide receiver money. Diontae Johnson's chilling at a sound $20 million, which is Brandon Cook's tax bracket. And I feel real comfortable placing him in that category because I think he's better than Brandon Cooks, but he puts up the same amount of numbers.
See, we had this conversation, I feel like a couple weeks ago after Christian Kirk signed that deal to where he was making, what, $18-20 million a year. Shout out to his agent, by the way. That man deserves a statue of him to be built somewhere for getting Christian Kirk that deal. Never had 1,000 yards receiving and got paid like a wide receiver number one. So shout out to Christian Kirk.
He got paid more than Chris Godwin. Yeah. Rough. If I'm Chris Godwin, I'm firing my agent yesterday.
I think the reality of the league that we're watching unfold right now is that it's always going to be a league that tries to one up the other. And I think Jalen Ramsey went on a podcast a couple weeks ago and just perfectly summed it up. This is where it's kind of, it is what it is. Like if I'm making 24 million, the next guy above him that wants to get paid, he should get 25 and so on and so forth. And, you know, it's always this league to where you're always looking to be the X amount paid, whether it's highest or top 5, top 10, whatever it might be. The problem is that the longer the Steelers wait to sign Deontay Johnson, the more that price tag is going to climb. Months ago, Noah Strackmine, we sat on this podcast and we discussed whether or not we would pay Deontay Johnson $15 million a year. Yep. 1-5. Now, we're basically conceding that he's probably going to get $20 million a year, as he should. He should. Like you pointed out, if he's making money like Brandon Cooks, Christian Kirk, just guys along that area, I mean, we can all agree Deontay Johnson is probably a better receiver than those two guys, no?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally
Right.
agree with that.
So if you wait this long time and guys like Debo, guys like Terry McLaurin, guys like AJ Brown hit those deals, you are only setting the bar higher and higher for Deontay and his agent to go, hey, so X, Y, and Z got paid 1, 2, and 3. Here's where we're going to start. Where if you would have done this a few months ago, or even in retrospect, whenever we're talking in the future, if we would have done this now, the price tag would have been lower than, it would have saved you a couple million per season
definitely would have.
if you would have just got the deal out of the way. But to your point, we all know that Minka is priority number one for the Steelers, as he should be.
Mm-hmm.
As he should be. And Deontay's just got to wait.
Deontay's got to wait. Let me ask this, though. Do you think that, so like in the beginning, obviously that $5 million gap has happened, or that jump has happened, and that was a mistake on the Steelers' part, but that's how they move. Do you think now, like AJ Brown is not going to get $30 million a year?
No.
Deebo Samuels is probably going to get $26 million a year, which is nuts, but Deebo Samuels is kind of a different character. Yep. Terry McLaurin's probably going to be in the AJ Brown category. Do you think that that's actually a good thing for the Steelers? Like if they all sign at like that $24 million range, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to look at Diontae and say like, okay, man, like for one, you're not these guys. Like, and we could be straightforward about that. You're not these guys. And we don't value you as these guys. And two, like we're the Pittsburgh Steelers and yeah, we're trying to keep you around, but we have to build a team moving forward. I think that like goes like TJ Watt signed a record-breaking deal, but still kept his cap hit relatively low for the Steelers. I think Minka will be somewhat in the same range. I think Diontae has an opportunity, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think that the Steelers have an opportunity to let these guys sign and say, okay, well, their value is 24, your value is 21. And Deontay's like, yeah, maybe I feel comfortable with that.
So I think whenever we talk about contracts and, signing guys to extensions, a lot of salary cap magic can get lost in just thinking, hey, this guy is going to make X amount per year. Here's guaranteed money. Here's the amount of years he signed for. Here's his roster bonuses and all that good stuff. You can maneuver the salary cap extremely well to where, especially in a world where the salary cap is going to continue to skyrocket like it's going to in the next couple of years, or at least that's how it's going to be projected, you can finagle Deontay's cap hit to be lower the next couple years, and then it proceedingly gets higher as the salary cap jumps. Like, you do not have to be married to a singular cap figure per season. It's not like even if you do sign him for $24 million a year, it's not like you are only stuck with that. You can maneuver money around. You can convert money into roster bonuses to save you X amount of money on the salary cap if you're really pressed for it. And especially for a Steelers organization that has proven the capability to do that offseason after offseason, I'm just not worried about it. Like if I'm stuck at like 20 million, if I'm the Steelers, because like, let's be real, I think that's where it's going to start for Deontay, around that like 19, 20 million area. And Deontay wants 23 or like 24. Like
I'm not giving
how much wiggle
24.
room are you going to allow yourself?
I'm giving zero. I'm not going. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're Diontae Johnson and you want $22 million a year, I'm saying sorry, but we're going to move on, because I think that that's just a little bit unreasonable.
I think at this moment in time, right now, I don't think you can do that.
I do. Why not? Why can't they? Why can't you do that?
If Chase Claypool was anything close to the receiver that the Steelers drafted him to be, then I think you have leverage, because you could say, okay, we have Chase Claypool. We just took a guy in the first round or second round of the NFL draft. Cool. Adios. We'll talk to you later.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. They don't.
Yeah, but they could franchise tag
Deontay Johnson walks, okay, if Deontay Johnson walks next year and you're stuck with Chase Claypool, a first or second round pick, and then Miles Boykin as your third receiver, you're not feeling great about that.
But okay, but I get that right now. But in a month from now, I think that situation could be different, because if you have, and this is all hypothetical, but if you have Diontae, George Pickens, Chase Claypool, you're probably going to move on from Boykin the year after, and maybe somebody else, maybe Danny Gray late in the round. what's stopping you from saying, okay, Deontay Johnson's too expensive. Let's franchise tag him, try to deal him somewhere. Because if you franchise tag him and try to deal him somewhere, you could wheel and deal your way into maybe a first round pick. And I think that that's a possibility. And if not, you have Deontay Johnson for a season on a reasonable salary. And at that point, he's going to be 27 years old. So you're not even looking to re-sign him at that point. You're just looking, okay, let's move on. I mean,
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you. One, I see the people in the comments talking about the drops, and don't get me wrong, I am 1,000% with those people because
let me ask this.
I do think the drops, and we've debated this. I think the drops kind of came back at the end of the season. I still think he had a really good year last year, but it still kind of concerns me a little bit. Say what you need to say before we dive into the franchise tag stuff.
If Deontay Johnson, Deontay Johnson dropped 5 passes last season, if Deontay Johnson, which is significantly down, the year before it was 13 passes, last year it was 5 passes. Say he dropped 5 passes last year, or even more. Say he dropped 8 or 9 passes last year, which is a significant number. But they all happened before week 14 of the NFL season. You'd complain, everybody would complain and complain and complain all season long that Deontay Johnson's dropping the football. And then he comes through in clutch time and he doesn't drop any passes.
Right.
Are we even having this conversation about drops? Or are people just totally ignoring it? Because I think that until week 17 of the NFL season, everybody was all gung-ho. Deontay Johnson is one of the best. And then you drop 2 passes in a playoff game, which I understand is a big deal. But he dropped 2 passes in a playoff game, and all of a sudden, everybody's like, this dude cannot catch a football for the life of him. My God. And I'm just like, dude, he dropped 2 passes, came back, and caught a touchdown. In my opinion, everybody is so overblown with that nonsense. Like, it's 5 drop passes. If he improves the way he improved last season or 2 seasons ago to the last season, he'll have -3 drops in 2022. I think it's a little early. I think it's a little early to be saying, oh, he's always going to drop passes.
I do agree with a lot of what you just said. And I think the difference is that if he dropped those passes in the beginning 3 or 4 weeks of the season and he finishes strong, then yeah, we're kind of celebrating him a little bit and talking about DJ as, the next guy that's going to be paid in Pittsburgh. But it didn't happen like that. It did not happen like that. We do not play the if game here in All Steelers Talk. Deontay Johnson, it did not come through clutch for the Steelers whenever the Steelers needed him. And I think that's a big reason why fans are not like reluctant to pay him, but it's like, okay, well, if we're paying you $20 million a year, bro, you got to catch those passes, man, especially towards the end of the year in crunch time. You definitely have to do this. Okay, so
okay.
What number do you think Deontay's gunning for? Like per year?
I don't know. I would say 20. If I'm Deontay Johnson, I'm gunning for $20 million a year, and I'm feeling real good about that number.
What number are you, Noah Strackbein, comfortable with paying him?
$20 million. I'm very comfortable with him getting $20 million a year.
Because I was looking at because he's going into his last year of his contract, and if they don't ink him to an extension this offseason, it might be anybody's guess to where he lands next offseason, right? Especially with the salary cap jumping up. $20 million is going to look like the new $15 million. I mean, it's going to be wild.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the franchise tag because I was looking at the figures for this year. And granted, these are going to go up, but the non-exclusive tag was set at $18.4 million, and the transition tag was set at $16.78 million. They're going to jump, but not drastically, right? Nope. Not like by $15 million a year. What would be your thoughts of holding off on extending Deontay, letting him play 2022, and then slapping him with one of those tags?
If he's gonna look for more than $22 million a year, I feel totally fine with that. Because at the same time, and just like I said, and I think we'll have a better understanding in a week and a half after the draft, but I think that there's a possibility that in 2 years, you don't really need Diontae Johnson. And that stinks because I think that you do need Diontae Johnson. And the offense is obviously better with Diontae Johnson. But it's such a wheel and deal league this year that I don't think that's going to slow down. And I think there's going to be people making phone calls for Deontay Johnson next season. Like, hey, my wide receiver is asking for $25 million. Deontay's got a franchise tag for $20.5 million. I'm just going to take him. And I think that people will make those phone calls, especially if he has a good year. I don't expect Deontay Johnson to get worse in 2022. I expect him to get significantly better, significantly better, especially now. If everything goes as planned and, that means no injuries, the whole nine, Deontay is mad, he's motivated, and he's only getting better. So I just have a hard time believing that people aren't going to be like, oh, this dude is legit in his 4th year in the NFL. It's not like he's been here a long time.
Yeah, and there are a couple different tags the Steelers can use on Diontae should they choose to not extend him this offseason. You do have the exclusive franchise tag, which is pretty much the highest tag available. The player cannot talk to any other teams if they are hit with the exclusive tag. A top 5 average of the current wide receiver market, or I think it's 120% higher than the player's salary, whichever is higher. Then you have the non-exclusive tag, which does allow other teams to negotiate with said player, in this case, Deontay Johnson. The Steelers can choose not to match the offer, or they could choose to match it. But if they choose not to match the offer, say another team offers Deontay Johnson, the Steelers would receive 2 first-round picks from that team, and then the non-exclusive tag would be top 5 money for the past 5 seasons. So it is going to be a little bit lower than the exclusive. And then you have the good old Le'Veon Bell transition tag that was used a few years back on him. Top 10 players at the position. The Steelers would have right of refusal, but no compensation if they choose not to match.
I think you slap them with an exclusive rights tender. You wait for somebody to come, try to make them an offer. If that offer is too high, you say, whatever, man, give me 2 first-round picks. We move on from there. That sounds like a very reasonable time for me. That being said, if Deontay Johnson's okay with $20 million, sign him $20 million a year, say, sorry, everybody who hates this, but he's worth the money because that money's not a lot of money right now, especially if you don't have a quarterback contract. People are acting like the Pittsburgh Steelers are in trouble. They're not. They're nowhere near in trouble, and they're not going to be for the next 5-6 years. So